Hi all. The title of this is Kali Yuga 2.0, staying the course through an epic Plutonian death rattle for the ages. It starts in a newsletter on my website with a picture of Kali the Devourer and a quote by Marianne Williamson. Quote, "We're living in two worlds simultaneously, one the fall of Rome and the other a new renaissance. We need to be both death doulas and birth doulas, helping die peaceably the systems that need to die and helping give birth to a wholly different kind of world," unquote. Dear one, happy winter solstice. It's fitting that this newsletter ended up going out just after the darkest night of the year here, which perennially symbolizes the themes of rebirth, renewal, and the return of the light. As synchronistically, these are the exact same themes we're all going to be dealing with for the next 20 years and beyond. On this dark night, if we want to set the optimal tone for the Kali Yuga 2.0, we need to allow ourselves to viscerally feel the Earth's nature as it cyclically appears to get very, very dark before the light can return, but that it always does eventually. Pluto the Annihilator, whose archetypal energies are best expressed via Kali the Devourer and Shiva the Destroyer, just left Capricorn on November 20th, never to return in our lifetimes, in fact not for another 240 plus years. The last time Pluto was transiting the final 2 degrees of Capricorn, we had the American Revolution. Consequently, we're now witnessing the final hurrah of the USA's first Pluto return. And then comes the recurrence theme of rebirth and revolution over the next 20 years. But not yet. One of the most important takeaways from this newsletter is that what we're seeing now is not the rebirth to come of the new, but rather the death rattle, the last violent gasp of the old autocratic playbook, rising up one last time before it disintegrates for good. This outcome is almost assured as all the outer planets change signs and start major new cycles supporting this rebirth over the next 2 years. One might think that transformational Pluto, now that he has fully entered the sign of humanitarian Aquarius for the next 20 years, would allow things to be picking up in a positive way, right? Well, not so fast. For not only does each sign have a shadow side, but since Pluto operates through cycles of death and rebirth, regardless of the sign he's transiting through, we're still in the midst of a nihilistic and violent attempt to tear down to the ground just about everything those of us who care about others' well-being holds dear. This destruction is predominantly courtesy of the new trickster/clown-in-chief and his minions, aka the Demolition Squad. Trump is now, without doubt, definitively operating as a Plutonian, aka Putinesque, agent of chaos, as he attempts to dismantle as much as possible of the status quo, whether it be good, bad, or in his case simply indifferent, except as it affects him personally, which is the classic symptom of any malignant narcissist. Is this good news or bad news? Well, obviously it may appear not so great in the short run, but I foresee that in the middle and certainly in the very long run, it will all play out as a necessary evil, bringing to light a reawakening of the good in humanity. We could call this attitude, quote-unquote, tragic optimism, a phrase Viktor Frankl coined as to how he coped with the immense suffering and loss he experienced during the Holocaust. For more, there's a link to his classic book, Man's Search for Meaning, available on Amazon, which I encourage you to read. While, of course, we need structures in society governed by Saturn ruling Capricorn to keep government running smoothly, too much structure over too long creates too much clogging of the system to allow fresh air and ideas in. In fact, if nothing changes by 2050, the American people may look back fondly on the good old days when the annual Pentagon budget was still under $1 trillion. Now the budget is over $850 billion, as this is what happens when a rigid, huge bureaucratic structure like the DoD gets so bloated and Byzantine that they failed their audits 7 times in a row. If only the DoD would get the wrecking ball first, but alas, instead we'll have a front row seat witnessing an assault on our social safety net, which protects the most vulnerable. However, I truly believe that in hindsight, which is always 2020, we'll view this historical period as the last gasp of the archaic patriarchy/oligarchy degenerating totally. Then freedom and democracy will leave MAGA on the dust heap of history. Afterwards, there will arise, like a phoenix from the ashes, an epic rebirth over time, but probably not fully in most of our lifetimes. The good news is that the chaotic fall of the USA into a tarnished beacon of former liberty will certainly be much faster than when Rome fell and humanity had to live through almost 500 years of the Dark Ages before civilization was reborn in the ages of the Renaissance and Enlightenment. After all, since the barbarians are already here, we're already in the dumb ages as well as the dark, thus saving centuries of travel time. Here is a revised map that just about sums up the current situation. And there's a picture of a revised map, which is in the video scroll of images, in which America, except for the West Coast and the Northeast and Michigan and Illinois, is called, renamed Dumbfuckistan. Yes, in red. The good news is that this time with the quickening, the positive energies of the Aquarian age may begin to take hold over the next 20 years, with glimmers even sooner. And then there's a link for the quickening phase 2 is here to rock your world. And I said about the map of Dumbfuckistan that this is a revised map that just about sums up the current situation. The bad news is that in the short run, we may lose some governmental guardrails that, while surely in need of some updating, are also essential to preserve our freedom and help alleviate the suffering of those less fortunate. While we may be powerless to stop all the carnage, we can do a lot to mitigate it. What we do have power over is holding on to our faith in the light, aka the good in humanity, prevailing, which sets up a ripple effect in the tone of the mass reality of 3D, thus creating energetic emergency guardrails to keep us from total disaster over the next few years. So it's important that we hold the vision of our democracy standing strong over our most prized and precious freedoms. Before we go further, please remember this quote by Ram Dass. Quote, "We are in the perfect circumstances for our souls to learn whatever they designed this whole game to learn. As the process of karmic fruition speeds up, our lives get freer and freer from attachment and we create less and less karma," unquote. So exactly what kind of deeply transformational Plutonian energy are we dealing with now? Aquarian energy is innovative, revolutionary, eccentric, quirky, rebellious, and shocking. It is unconventional and marches fiercely to the beat of its own drum with an awareness of the collective. In its higher vibration, it can be altruistic and channel its rebel spirit to stand up for what is right and for the rights of others. In its lower vibration, Aquarian energy can manifest as self-righteousness, being stubborn and dogmatic, cold and detached, unwilling to yield, and outright domineering. Issues related to power, control, and individuality versus the collective are likely to surface while Pluto transits Aquarius. The Aquarian's shadow side, which we are seeing now, manifests as religious and political fundamentalism that is so dark it's quite scary to behold, similarly to that not so long ago period in our history in which tragic optimism arose as an antidote. Epitomizing Aquarius' dark side, we have the MAGA cult with Trump as a textbook Führer, with his Aquarius ruling trickster Uranus conjunct his Sun in North Node of Destiny in his 10th house of career, all in scattered Gemini. This means that he needs to be chaotically unpredictable, otherwise he gets bored and stirs up trouble. This is actually quite good news, as he gets so easily distracted by his handlers flashing shiny rattles at him that he rarely bothers following through on his almost always basest instincts. When expansive Jupiter transited this Gemini stellium exactly at the election, it may have boded well for his rise, but also for his inevitable fall. And the good news is that we will also get to see his demise from hubris, revenge, overreaching in his attempts to blow everything up, which is the shadow side of Jupiter, overreaching, and just basic stupidity. Years from now, we'll be able to look back at this time as a temporary, embarrassing aberration. Although I hardly think the toddler-in-chief will actually make it fully to term as his dementia progresses and stroke chances rise. My channels have emphasized to me that divine orderly chaos will continue to escalate on the planet over the coming years, and that each of us, to the degree we're able, needs to hold the tone of equanimity, faith in the flow, and yes, gratitude for our precious incarnation and the earth just as it is. We can still celebrate this great new age we're in, with accelerating energies moving us towards a tipping point in the light, in the unified field of consciousness, even if we're momentarily in a seemingly humongous giant leap backwards into the shadow side of the mass consciousness, spiritual cha-cha. Since linear time is operating faster, what once took over 4 centuries, such as the total decline of the Roman Empire, might now take just over 4 years, barbarian hordes and all. We've lived through many dark ages before in human history as part of the spontaneous movement of the Tao, from dark to light and back again, and need to remember that it's all an integral part of the Earth game. It just means that it's time once again to batten down the hatches, retreat to gather our forces, and sustain and feed the light with like-minded souls while we wait for the perfect time in the flow to expand outward again. Fully outward again. Synchronistically, this time in history also coincides with the possible ending of the Kali Yuga, the Dark Ages, in 2025, as predicted by some sages in the ancient Vedic spiritual philosophy of India. The ancients understood time as a circle, not linear, and the circle of ages is comprised of the yugas. Like the 4 seasons in our year, there are 4 yugas in the full cycle, called a Mahayuga. Each cycle has distinct themes and spiritual lessons for humanity. And in the images, there'll be a diagram of the 4 yugas in order from beginning to end. It is important to note that the first stage, the Satya Yuga, or the Golden Age, is the longest, with each one getting successively shorter, 4, 3, 2, 1, until the cycle starts again. As you can see, while this final Iron Age, which by some estimates began 2,700 years ago, lasts only 1/10 of the cycle, it is epitomized as one of darkness and ignorance. The Iron Age is also called the Kali Yuga. Here is a compilation from various ancient Vedic texts about the Kali Yuga. Quote, "People slide further down the path of dishonesty, with virtue being of little value. Passions become uncontrollable as unrestrained sexual indulgences and manipulations run through society. Liars and hypocrites rise. Important knowledge is lost and scriptures become less and less common. The human diet is now quote-unquote dirty, and people are not even close to being as powerful as their ancestors in the Satya Yuga. Likewise, the once pristine environment is now polluted. Water and food become scarce, as do family bonds," unquote. Does this all sound familiar? Continuing, quote, "The end of this yuga will inevitably be followed by cataclysmic earth changes and civilization collapses, as is characteristic of the transitional periods. We need to be aware of these greater cycles of time that govern human civilization and the changes that are looming on the horizon." In the Mahabharata, the longest poem in the planet's history, the Kali Yuga is considered the darkest age, a low point, unquote. So even if the Kali Yuga does begin to wind down in 2025 and beyond, there are still the predictions of volatile earth changes which occur during the transitional periods between yugas. This is verified by the current upswing in earthquakes and increasing incidence of extreme weather phenomena, all indicators that we may be in for an external bumpy ride for some time to come. This means for most of us for the rest of our incarnations, so we need to remain on alert to buckle up as needed for the remainder of the flight. In 10 years, we may actually look back at this period, even with all the upsets and instability going on, as a relatively peaceful calm before the storm of climate changes. Why? What to do? The Vedic scriptures and major Taoist teachings concur. Meditation and various spiritual practices are the natural medicine to help us survive during tumultuous times such as these. Now more than ever, we must strengthen our personal practice and act as a light for those around us who feel most lost. To find inner peace within the most unpeaceful of times is true spiritual attainment and a most worthy goal. With power player Pluto and Uranus ruled Aquarius for the next 20 years, being proactively mindful of what we do have power over is the key to flourishing while maintaining peace of mind, and that is peace over our inner kingdom. We have power over our inner kingdom of physical senses, emotions, thoughts, conscious awareness, and discriminating mind. This way, instead of succumbing to feeling disoriented, anxious, or depressed in an unstable, ungrounded way by allowing the mass tone of consciousness, always the lowest vibrational common denominator, to affect our emotional tone, we can choose to maintain peace in our inner kingdom by our daily spiritual and mind-body practices and allow this tone to affect our personal reality and, in the ripple effect, to affect the energies on planet Earth as we choose to experience it. As we hold the vision of an inevitable rebirth, the astrology of 2025 and beyond confirms this direction. As I wrote in 2016, most importantly, Transformer Pluto begins his uninterrupted 20-year sojourn through Aquarius, November 19, 2024. This means that the period of time between now and at least the first half of 2025 will be an especially wild ride, as obsolete paradigms, beliefs, and structures, and those attached and identified with them, will not fall away without a fight for their continued existence. This turbulence is exacerbated exponentially as revolutionary ruling Uranus, gestation retrograde September 1st, trining the very last pass of the USA Pluto return to 29 Capricorn, which means it will be commencing the next 248-year Plutonian cycle with a theme of insurrection and rebellion, just as it was as this country's founding. For the next 20 years, Pluto in Aquarius will be setting a new high-frequency tone of humanitarianism, unity consciousness, and the dissolving of all the old illusionary boundaries of race, class, and nations. However, the first years of this particular Plutonian cycle of death and rebirth will be a time of escalating upheaval, chaos, and a churning, tumultuous level of change, as outmoded repressive structures threatening individual liberty disintegrate all over the planet. This has already begun. I wrote this in 2016, and I'm looking at the news with Syria, it's Assad just falling, and more autocrats to come falling. At the same time that the old societal belief structures are falling away, there will arise a fear-based resistance coming from pockets of the asleep masses, expressed through ideologies such as an overzealous nationalism and a fascism disguised populism. This also has already begun. On a personal note, this newsletter took several weeks longer than usual for me to write, as I was cycling through the 5 stages of mourning, and until I reached at least some acceptance in the final stage, I wasn't clear enough for this download. I also want to apologize to those who took my election prediction so much to heart as an absolute truth in this relative plane that it added to their upset when the results came in. I'll admit that I was also very personally invested in getting some relief from the clown car, and needed to remember that in a non-theistic state of mind, abandoning hope is an affirmation, the beginning of the beginning. What does the Buddha say about hope? Hope is often tied into desire and craving, which Buddhists regard as a form of suffering. There's too much attachment. Hope for happiness and fear of suffering, as well as fame and infamy, praise and blame, gain and loss, are the 8 worldly dharmas, states of mental grasping that keeps us locked into deluded ways of being. Alternatively, the Dalai Lama said, quote, "Our lives depend on hope. If you have hope, you'll be able to overcome problems you face. But if you're without hope, your difficulties will increase. Hope is linked to compassion and loving kindness. In my own experience, I faced all sorts of difficulties in my life, but I never gave up hope. Also, being truthful and honest is a basis for hope and self-confidence," unquote. I'll have some of what he's having. And while I'm still resolving some challenging body karma health issues, I'm now in a place, as I write this, of appreciation for what is just the way it is. In other words, it's one of my favorite stories. A Zen master who, while out walking one day, is confronted by a ferocious man-eating tiger. He slowly backs away from the animal, only to find that he is trapped at the edge of a high cliff. The tiger snarls with hunger and pursues the master. His only hope of escape is to suspend himself over the abyss by holding onto a vine that grows at its edge. As the master dangles from the cliff, 2 mice, one white and one black, begin to gnaw on the vine he is clutching on. If he climbs back up, the tiger will surely devour him. If he stays, then there is the certain death of a long fall onto the jagged rocks. The slender vine begins to give way, and death is imminent. Just then, the precariously suspended Zen master notices a lovely ripe wild strawberry growing along the cliff's edge. He plucks the succulent berry and pops it into his mouth. He is heard to say, quote, "This lovely strawberry, how sweet it tastes," unquote. It's also good to keep in mind that the human evolution of consciousness is still in its baby stages in terms of potentials. In the 1970s, Chogyam Trungpa said that only about 1% of humanity is ready for awakening to higher consciousness. Now, in my view, maybe 2%. This means that the 98% of humanity still asleep are among those who voted for the dark side of human nature, as well as the 90 million who didn't even bother to vote at all. Included in this group is a subset of those most predisposed towards rabid conspiracy theories, which have been running rampant for years and having a renaissance now. If you look deeply enough, you'll see that most of us with this susceptibility are traumatized by unhealed childhood abuse on various levels, with the original perpetrator projected out into all kinds of nefarious fantasies of those people or vaccines that could harm them again. Like that. I said vaccines, I meant of those people or things, that could harm them again. It's like a form of trauma-imposed hypervigilance of the mental body. For more, there's a link to global karmic PTSD. In closing, I think it's helpful to keep in mind that we're only on the threshold of the next great age in the sign of Aquarius, which will last for over 2,000 years. Thus, the higher frequency galactic energies bombarding us, while necessary to kickstart this new stage in the evolution of human consciousness, are also playing havoc with all levels of our bodies, from the psychic to the physical. We are all becoming evolutionary guinea pigs in the vanguard of this new age. Our new normal is learning how to live as if we are in between the old 3D ways of being in this relative plane and simultaneously becoming acclimated to being in 5D and beyond while fully embodied. The culmination of this Bardo period will be an expansion of the range of being vertically and horizontally, so that ultimately we'll all identify as multidimensional beings experiencing an earthly sojourn. And finally, here are my soul-level resolutions for our Pluto and Aquarius curriculum and beyond. 1. I'm exercising patience as events unfold, since there may be FGOs, fucking growth opportunities yet to be revealed, especially in such dark nights of our collective soul. ... and smile. 2. I'm enjoying the ride today even more by acting as if each day is my last. ... and smile. 3. I'm holding the faith that life goes on, our souls live on, and that which we have always been seeking, source, has been inside us all along. ... and smile. 4. I'm grateful that life is doing its damnedest to help us remember why we are truly here, and just keep on smiling. Wishing us all bliss and equanimity as we witness the unfolding of all the good news and all the bad news, especially whatever triggers our personal alarm bells, as this is where our healing and soul growth will flourish the most. As we awaken and open our hearts more to our true identity of pure being, I see us dancing with whatever is in the flow, with neither attachment nor aversion to timing or outcomes. And so it is. Love always, Joan. And I close with a quote from the Unknown Teachings of Lao Tzu. Quote, "The character of your existence is determined by the energies to which you connect yourself. If you attach yourself to gross energies, loving this person, hating this clan, rejecting one experience, or habitually indulging in another, then you will lead a series of heavy attached lives. This can go on for a very long and tedious time. The way of the integral being is to join with higher things. By holding to that which is refined and subtle, she traverses refined and subtle realms. If she enters the world, she does so lightly, without attachment. In this way, she can go anywhere without ever leaving the center of the universe." Unquote.